The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle, as Prince William stood at the grand window of his private study. His hands trembled slightly as he held the official letter that would change everything. The royal seal felt heavier than usual in his palm, and the words seemed to blur together despite reading them countless times over the past week. Kate walked into the room quietly, her footsteps barely audible on the thick carpet. She had been watching him from the doorway for several minutes, knowing exactly what thoughts were racing through his mind. The decision they had made together felt right in their hearts, but explaining it to the world would be the hardest thing they had ever done. "The children are having breakfast in the garden," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "They keep asking when we're going to tell them about our big adventure." William turned to face his wife, seeing the same mix of determination and sadness in her eyes that he felt in his own heart. They had talked about this moment for months, weighing every possible outcome, every consequence their choice would bring. The weight of duty had always been heavy on their shoulders, but lately it felt crushing. "Do you think we're making the right choice?" he asked, though they had discussed this question hundreds of times before. Kate moved closer, taking his hands in hers. Her wedding ring caught the morning light, reminding them both of the promises they had made not just to each other, but to the crown and the people. "We've given everything we had to give," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. 20 years of our lives, our privacy, our dreams. We've raised our children in a fishbowl, and they deserve to know what it feels like to be ordinary kids. At least for a while." The sound of laughter drifted up from the gardens below, where Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were playing with their beloved dog, Orla. The children had no idea that their parents were about to make an announcement that would shock not just Britain, but the entire world. They were planning to step back from royal duties indefinitely, seeking a quieter life away from the constant scrutiny and pressure. William remembered the last conversation he had with his father, King Charles. The disappointment in the monarch's eyes was something that would haunt him forever, but he also saw understanding there. Charles himself had struggled with the balance between duty and personal happiness for most of his life. He had given his blessing, though it came with tears and a long embrace that said more than words ever could. The couple had spent the previous night writing personal letters to close family members, explaining their decision before the official announcement would be made. Each letter was carefully crafted, expressing their deep love for the family and the institution, while also explaining their need to prioritize their own family's well-being and mental health. Kate walked over to the desk, where several draft speeches lay scattered about. She picked up the final version, the one they would read together in front of the cameras later that afternoon. The words were simple but powerful, explaining that they would always love and respect the royal family, but that they needed to step away to focus on being parents and finding their own path in life. "The car will be here in 2 hours," William said, looking at his watch. They had planned to spend the morning at Kensington Palace, their London residence, for what would likely be their final official photographs as working members of the royal family. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that their last official act would be to announce they were no longer performing official acts. The phone on William's desk rang, startling them both. It was their private secretary, confirming that the media had been notified of an important announcement scheduled for 3 o'clock that afternoon. Social media was already buzzing with speculation, and news outlets around the world were clearing their schedules to cover what many suspected would be major royal news. Kate sat down in the chair across from William's desk, the same chair where they had made countless decisions about charity work, public appearances, and family matters over the years. Now it would be where they made their final decision as working royals. She looked around the study, taking in all the familiar details. The family photos, the books William loved to read, the awards and honors they had received for their public service. "I keep thinking about what people will say," she admitted, voicing a fear they both shared. "Will they understand why we're doing this? Will they think we're abandoning our responsibilities?" William joined her, sitting on the edge of his desk so they were at eye level. "We've never abandoned anything," he said firmly. "We've given our entire adult lives to public service. We've raised our children in the spotlight, dealt with constant criticism and praise, and we've done it all with dignity. But we're also human beings, and human beings need the freedom to make choices about their own lives." The decision hadn't been made lightly or quickly. It had been brewing for years, especially as they watched their children grow up without the normal childhood experiences that most kids take for granted. They wanted George, Charlotte, and Louis to have the chance to discover who they were outside of their royal titles, to make friends based on their personalities rather than their status, and to make mistakes without the entire world watching and judging. As they sat in comfortable silence, both William and Kate reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From their university romance to their fairy tale wedding, from welcoming their first child to taking on more and more royal responsibilities, their lives had been extraordinary in every sense of the word. But extraordinary didn't always mean fulfilling, and they had both reached a point where they craved something more ordinary, more authentic, and more their own. The journey from Windsor to Kensington Palace felt longer than usual, despite taking the same route they had traveled hundreds of times before. William and Kate sat in the back of their official car, watching the familiar London streets pass by through tinted windows. Neither spoke much during the drive, both lost in their own thoughts about what the next few hours would bring. Kate clutched a small notebook in her hands, filled with talking points they had prepared together. She had always been meticulous about preparation, but today felt different. These weren't notes for a charity speech or a public engagement. These were the words that would explain to the world why they were choosing to walk away from a life that millions of people dreamed of having. Their driver, Davies, had been with them for over 8 years. He had driven them to countless royal events, hospital visits, and family gatherings. Through the rearview mirror, Kate could see the confusion and sadness in his eyes. The palace staff had been informed that morning about the upcoming announcement, and the news had spread through the corridors like wildfire. "Mrs. Davies packed you both some tea and biscuits for the afternoon," he said quietly, referring to his wife who worked in the palace kitchens. "She wanted you to know that the entire staff understands your decision, and we're all behind you." William felt a lump forming in his throat. The palace staff had become like extended family over the years, and knowing that they supported this difficult choice meant more than he could express. These were the people who saw them not as public figures, but as a young couple trying to balance impossible expectations with their desire to be good parents and partners. As they approached Kensington Palace, Kate noticed the increased number of photographers and news vans lining the streets. Word had clearly gotten out that something significant was happening, though the exact nature of the announcement remained a mystery to the public. She squeezed William's hand, drawing strength from their connection as they had done countless times throughout their marriage. The palace felt different when they arrived. Staff members they passed in the hallways offered small smiles and nods of encouragement, but there was an underlying sadness that everyone was trying to hide. This wasn't just about William and Kate stepping back from royal duties. It was about the end of an era that had brought so much joy and stability to the monarchy. In their private apartment, the couple took a few moments to collect themselves before the afternoon's events. Kate touched up her makeup while William reviewed his notes one final time. They had decided to wear simple, elegant clothing for the announcement. Nothing too formal that might suggest celebration, but nothing too casual that might appear disrespectful. "The children called from school," Kate mentioned, checking her phone. "Charlotte wanted to know if we remembered her dance recital is next Friday." The normalcy of the request struck them both. While they were about to change their family's entire future, their children were still thinking about typical childhood concerns like dance recitals and football matches. William smiled, remembering how Charlotte had practiced her routine every evening for the past month, insisting that both parents had to watch her perform. After today's announcement, they would actually be able to attend more of these precious moments without the constant worry about security protocols and media attention. Their private secretary knocked on the door, informing them that the media room was ready and that representatives from major news outlets around the world were in attendance. The announcement would be broadcast live, and they estimated that hundreds of millions of people would be watching or would hear about it within hours. As they walked toward the media room, Kate and William passed by the portrait gallery that showcased previous generations of royals. Each painting represented individuals who had dedicated their entire lives to duty and service, many of whom had sacrificed personal happiness for the greater good of the monarchy. For a moment, they both wondered if those ancestors would understand their choice or if they would view it as a betrayal of tradition. "We're not the first royals to choose love over duty," William whispered to Kate. thinking of his own great-uncle King Edward VIII, who had abdicated the throne to marry the woman he loved. While their situation was different, they weren't giving up the throne itself. They were choosing their family's well-being over royal expectations. The media room was filled with familiar faces, reporters who had covered their wedding, the births of their children, and countless royal tours and engagements over the years. These journalists had watched them grow from young newlyweds into confident parents and public figures. Some looked genuinely concerned, while others were clearly excited about what was undoubtedly going to be one of the biggest royal stories in decades. Kate took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. In just a few minutes, they would sit behind the microphones and change everything. Their children's lives would be different. Their own futures would be uncertain. The monarchy itself would have to adapt and move forward without two of its most popular members. "Are you ready?" William asked, taking her hand as they approached the podium. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Kate replied, and she meant it. Despite the fear and uncertainty, despite knowing they would face criticism and questioning, she felt a sense of relief that surprised her with its intensity. They had spent years being the perfect royal couple, never putting a foot wrong, always smiling at the right moments and saying the appropriate things. Today, for the first time in their public lives, they were going to be completely honest about their feelings, their struggles, and their dreams for the future. The cameras began rolling and the room fell silent. This was it. The moment when the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge would become simply William and Kate Wales, a family choosing to write their own story rather than following a script that had been written for them centuries before they were born. The bright camera lights felt warmer than usual as William and Kate took their seats at the podium. The room was completely silent except for the quiet hum of recording equipment and the distant sound of London traffic outside. Kate placed her hands carefully on the table in front of her, noticing that they were steadier than she had expected them to be. William looked directly into the main camera, the same way he had done hundreds of times before during official broadcasts, but this time his expression was different. There was vulnerability there that the public had rarely seen, a rawness that came from making the most difficult decision of their lives. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice clear and strong despite the emotion behind it. "Kate and I have asked you here today to share some important news about our family's future." He paused, glancing at his wife, who nodded encouragingly. Kate leaned toward the microphone, her voice gentle but determined. "We have always believed that our role as members of the royal family comes with incredible privilege, but also with great responsibility. For the past 15 years, we have tried to honor both that privilege and responsibility with dignity and dedication." The reporters in the room were completely still, hanging on every word. Many had covered royal stories for decades, but they had never seen William and Kate speak with such personal honesty during an official announcement. "However," William continued, "we have reached a point in our lives where we must prioritize our roles as parents above all else. Our children are at crucial stages in their development, and we believe they deserve the opportunity to grow up with as much normalcy as possible." Kate's voice joined his, their words flowing together as naturally as if they were having a private conversation, rather than addressing the world. "This decision has not been made lightly or quickly. We have spent months discussing it with family members, trusted advisors, and most importantly, with each other. We understand that it will disappoint some people, and we genuinely regret any disappointment our choice may cause." The camera captured the genuine emotion on both their faces as they spoke about their children. William's jaw tightened slightly when he mentioned George, Charlotte, and Louis, clearly struggling with the knowledge that this decision would change their lives forever, even though he believed it was for the better. "We will be stepping back from our royal duties effective immediately," Kate announced, the words hanging heavy in the air. "This means we will no longer carry out official engagements, represent the crown at ceremonial functions, or maintain our current patronages." William took over, explaining the practical aspects of their decision. "We will retain our titles, but we will not use them in our daily lives. We plan to relocate our family to a private residence, where our children can attend regular schools and participate in normal childhood activities without the security concerns and media attention that have been constant factors in their lives." The questions from reporters came immediately, voices calling out from every corner of the room. But William raised his hand gently, indicating that they would finish their statement before taking any questions. This wasn't going to be a typical royal press conference where every word was carefully managed by palace communication staff. Kate spoke directly to the camera, her eyes seeming to connect with each viewer personally. We want to be clear that this decision comes from a place of love. Love for our children, love for each other, and love for the royal family. We are not running away from responsibility. We are choosing to be responsible in a different way. Our children have given us the greatest joy of our lives, William added, his voice softening. George has his father's love of flying and dreams of becoming a pilot. Charlotte wants to be a veterinarian and spends every free moment reading about animals. Louis is fascinated by music and has been teaching himself to play the piano. These are normal childhood dreams, and we want to give them the space to pursue those dreams without the weight of royal expectations. The emotion in the room was palpable. Several reporters were visibly moved by the couple's honesty about their children's individual personalities and interests, details they had rarely shared publicly before. Kate continued, "We have watched other members of our family struggle to balance personal happiness with royal duty, and we have learned from their experiences. We believe it is possible to serve one's country and community without sacrificing one's family in the process. This is not goodbye forever," William clarified, sensing the need to reassure both the media and the public. "We will always be available to support the royal family during major events or times of crisis. But we need to step away from the day-to-day demands of royal life to focus on being the parents our children need us to be." The couple then took turns reading from prepared statements that addressed some of the questions they knew people would have. They discussed their gratitude for the opportunities they had been given, their respect for the institution of monarchy, and their confidence that the royal family would continue to thrive without them. Kate's voice grew stronger as she spoke about their future plans. "We intend to pursue meaningful work that aligns with our values and interests, but as private citizens rather than as representatives of the crown. We hope to contribute to society in ways that feel authentic to who we are as individuals." William concluded their formal statement by addressing the British people directly. "We have been honored to serve you for the past 15 years. Your support, kindness, and understanding have meant everything to us. We hope that you will respect our family's privacy as we begin this new chapter of our lives." The room erupted with questions as soon as William finished speaking, but the couple stood up together, indicating that the formal announcement was complete. They had said everything they needed to say, and now it was time to let the world process this unprecedented decision. As William and Kate walked away from the podium, the sound of urgent questioning and camera shutters filled the air behind them. They moved slowly, maintaining their composure until they reached the privacy of the corridor outside the media room. Only then did Kate allow herself to lean against the wall for a moment, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. "It's done," William said softly, placing his arm around his wife's shoulders. "There's no going back now." They could hear their communications team already fielding follow-up questions from the press, but they had made it clear beforehand that there would be no additional statements or interviews. They had said everything they needed to say, and now the world would have to process their decision. Their phones began buzzing almost immediately with messages from family members, friends, and palace staff. The first text was from King Charles simply saying, "I love you both. You have my support." Queen Camilla had sent a longer message, expressing her understanding and offering to help with the children during the transition period. Kate smiled through her tears as she read a message from Prince Harry, who was calling from California. "Finally," his text read, "I knew you two would figure it out eventually. Meghan and I are here for whatever you need." The parallels to Harry and Meghan's own departure from royal duties weren't lost on anyone. But William and Kate had been careful to emphasize that their situation was different. They weren't moving to another country or completely cutting ties with the family. They simply wanted to create a more balanced life for their children while remaining close to the people and places they loved. As they walked back to their apartment, they passed several staff members who offered quiet words of support. Mrs. Patterson, who had been Kate's dresser for over a decade, squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're doing the right thing, Your Royal Highness. Your children are lucky to have parents who put them first." Inside their apartment, William and Kate sat together on the sofa where they had spent countless evenings reviewing their schedules. discussing charitable projects and helping their children with homework. Everything looked the same, but somehow the atmosphere felt completely different. There was a lightness in the air that neither of them had felt in years. Kate picked up a photo from the side table, a candid shot of their family during a private vacation in Scotland the previous summer. All five of them were laughing at something Louis had said, completely relaxed and natural. It was one of the few photos they had where they looked like an ordinary family rather than a royal one. "This is what we're fighting for," she said, showing the picture to William. "More moments like this." Their private secretary knocked on the door, informing them that the palace switchboard was being overwhelmed with calls from news outlets around the world. Social media was exploding with reactions ranging from shock and disappointment to admiration and support. The hashtag Respect Their Choice was trending worldwide, along with William and Kate and royal family. William decided to check the news coverage, despite Kate's suggestion that they might want to wait a few days before seeing how their announcement was being received. The headlines were dramatic as expected: "Shock royal exit, end of an era, and the Cambridge fairy tale is over." But as they read further, they found that many of the articles were surprisingly supportive. Royal correspondents who had covered them for years were writing thoughtful pieces about the pressures of modern royal life and the importance of mental health and family well-being. One article particularly caught Kate's attention. It was written by a journalist who had followed their charitable work extensively, and she wrote, "William and Kate have given 15 years of flawless public service. They have raised awareness for mental health, supported veterans, championed early childhood development, and handled every crisis with grace and dignity. If they believe their children need them to step back, then perhaps we should trust their judgment as parents rather than criticize their decision." The couple received a phone call from their children's school, where George, Charlotte, and Louis were still attending classes, unaware that their parents had just changed their family's entire future. The headmaster assured them that extra security measures had been put in place and that the children would be protected from any media attention during school hours. "When do we tell them?" Kate wondered aloud. They had planned to have a family meeting that evening, but now she wondered if they should wait until they could better predict how the public would react to their decision. "Tonight," William said firmly. "They deserve to hear it from us before they hear it from anyone else. And honestly, I think they're going to be excited about the possibilities." As the afternoon wore on, messages of support continued to pour in from unexpected sources. Former prime ministers, celebrities, charity leaders, and ordinary citizens were expressing their understanding and respect for the couple's choice. Even some members of parliament were making statements about the importance of work-life balance and the need to modernize expectations around royal duties. Kate was particularly moved by a video message from a group of military veterans who had worked with William through the Invictus Games. "You've given us everything," one of them said. "Now it's time for you to give something to yourselves and your children." Late in the afternoon, they received a call from the Archbishop of Canterbury, who had officiated at their wedding 13 years earlier. He spoke about the sanctity of family and the importance of following one's conscience even when it meant making difficult choices. His support meant a great deal to both of them, especially given the religious and traditional aspects of royal duty. As evening approached, William and Kate began preparing for what might be the most important conversation of their parenting journey. They would need to explain to their children why their lives were about to change dramatically, while also helping them understand that this change was motivated by love and hope for their future. The sun was setting over London, casting a golden glow through the windows of their apartment. In a few hours, they would no longer be working members of the royal family. Tomorrow, they would wake up as private citizens for the first time in their adult lives. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The car ride to collect the children from school was filled with nervous energy. William drummed his fingers against his knee while Kate practiced different ways to explain their decision to three young minds who had never known life outside the royal bubble. They had decided to pick up George, Charlotte, and Louis personally rather than having them brought home by their usual security detail, wanting this moment to be as normal and family-focused as possible. Outside Lambrook School, they could see that extra security measures were already in place, though the school had done an excellent job of keeping everything discreet. Other parents collecting their children offered polite nods and smiles. But there was clearly an awareness that something significant was happening. George was the first to spot his parents' car, and he ran toward them with his usual enthusiasm, his school bag bouncing against his back. Charlotte followed more carefully, always the considerate one, making sure she said proper goodbyes to her friends before leaving. Louis bounded out of the building with paint-covered fingers and a huge grin, proudly carrying an artwork he had created during afternoon activities. "Mummy, Daddy, look what I made," Louis called out, waving his painting in the air. It was a colorful family portrait showing all 5 of them standing in a garden, with their dog Orla prominently featured in the foreground. Kate felt her heart catch as she looked at the innocent artwork. In Louis's painting, they were just a happy family enjoying time together outdoors. No crowns, no formal clothes, no cameras. It was exactly the vision that had driven their decision to step back from royal duties. "It's beautiful, darling," Kate said, giving Louis a hug while being careful not to smudge his artistic creation. "We'll hang it up as soon as we get home." George climbed into the car beside his father, chattering about his science lesson and a football match planned for the following week. Charlotte settled in next to Kate, pulling out a book about horses that she had been reading during free time. For a few minutes it felt like any other school pickup, just parents collecting their children after a normal day. But as they drove through London, William and Kate exchanged glances that communicated their shared nervousness about the conversation ahead. They had discussed how to approach the topic with the children, but there was no guidebook for explaining to young royals that their parents had just made one of the most controversial decisions in modern monarchy history. Back at Kensington Palace, they settled in the family sitting room, a comfortable space filled with photos, children's artwork, and the kind of casual furniture that invited relaxation. Kate had prepared tea and biscuits, though she wasn't sure anyone would have much appetite once their discussion began. "We have something important to talk to you all about," William began, his voice gentle but serious enough to capture all 3 children's attention. George looked up from his homework. Charlotte closed her book and Louis stopped building with his blocks. "Are we in trouble?" Charlotte asked, always the most perceptive of the 3 children. "No, sweetheart," Kate assured her quickly. "You're not in trouble at all. Actually, this is about some changes that are going to happen in our family, and we wanted you to hear about them from us first." William took a deep breath before continuing. "You know how Mummy and I have jobs as part of the royal family, going to events and visiting people and helping with important causes?" All 3 children nodded. They had grown up attending some royal events and understood in basic terms that their parents had special responsibilities because of who they were. "Well," Kate continued, "we've decided that we want to step back from those jobs so that we can spend more time focusing on being your parents, and our family can have more privacy." George frowned, trying to process this information. "Does that mean we won't be princes and princesses anymore?" "You'll always be who you are," William explained carefully. "But we're going to live more like a regular family. You'll still go to the same school and we'll still live together, but there won't be as many photographers following us around, and Mummy and I won't have to travel as much for work." Louis, being the youngest, was primarily interested in the practical implications. "Can we get a bigger dog?" he asked hopefully, having always wanted a larger pet but being told that their current living situation wasn't suitable. Kate laughed despite her nervousness. "We'll see about the dog, Louis, but yes, we might be able to move to a house with a bigger garden where you could have more space to play." Charlotte, always thoughtful, asked the question that both parents had been dreading. "Are people going to be upset with you for making this decision?" William and Kate had agreed to be honest with their children, while still protecting them from unnecessary worry. "Some people might not understand at first," Kate admitted. "But we believe that our most important job is being your parents, and we want to make sure we can do that job as well as possible." "Will we still see Grandpa Charles and Grandmama Camilla?" George wanted to know, showing his understanding that this change might affect their relationships with extended family. "Of course," William assured him quickly. "We'll still spend time with all our family members. We'll still go to big events like Christmas and birthdays. We're just not going to do as many work events anymore." The children absorbed this information with the adaptability that young people often display when faced with change. Charlotte asked if she could still take riding lessons. George wondered if this meant he could try out for the local football team, and Louis wanted to know if they could get pizza for dinner to celebrate. As the evening progressed, William and Kate were amazed by how easily their children accepted the news. Perhaps it was because they had always craved more normalcy in their lives. Or perhaps it was simply because children are naturally resilient when they feel loved and secure. "There is one more thing," Kate said, as they were getting ready for bedtime routines. "This change means that there might be more attention from newspapers and photographers for a while, until people get used to our new situation. So if you see cameras or reporters, just remember to stay close to Mummy or Daddy, and don't worry about them." George nodded seriously, understanding the gravity of media attention better than his younger siblings. "Will they say mean things about us?" "Most people will be kind and understanding," William replied, hoping it was true. "And remember, what matters most is how we treat each other and the people we care about. Other people's opinions can't change how much we love each other." That night, as they tucked each child into bed, William and Kate felt a sense of peace that they hadn't experienced in months. The hardest part, telling their children, was over, and the kids had responded better than they had dared to hope. 3 months had passed since the announcement that changed everything. William and Kate stood in the garden of their new home in Norfolk, watching their children play freely in a way they had never been able to before. The house was smaller than any of their previous residences, but it felt more like home than anywhere they had ever lived. George was teaching Louis how to properly kick a football, their laughter echoing across the expansive garden. Charlotte sat under an apple tree with a book and their new puppy, a golden retriever named Daisy that Louis had picked out from a local shelter. The scene was beautifully ordinary, exactly what William and Kate had dreamed of when they made their difficult decision. The transition hadn't been easy. The first few weeks after their announcement had been filled with intense media scrutiny, public debate, and criticism from those who felt they had abandoned their duty. But gradually, the attention had died down, and people began to respect their request for privacy. Kate had found unexpected joy in simple activities that most parents took for granted. She could now attend Charlotte's dance recitals without coordinating with security teams weeks in advance. William had coached George's local football team to victory in their regional tournament, standing on the sidelines cheering like any other parent. Louis had started piano lessons with a teacher in the village, his natural musical talent blossoming without the pressure of royal expectations. The couple had also discovered new ways to contribute to society that felt more authentic to their values. William had begun working with a conservation organization, using his expertise and connections to protect endangered wildlife without the formal constraints of royal protocols. Kate had started a small foundation focused on early childhood development, working directly with families in their local community, rather than making ceremonial appearances. Their relationship with the royal family had strengthened rather than weakened, as many critics had predicted. King Charles visited regularly, delighting in being able to spend relaxed time with his grandchildren without the formality that usually surrounded royal gatherings. Prince Harry and Meghan had come to stay for 2 weeks, and the cousins had formed close bonds while playing together in the garden and exploring the nearby countryside. "Do you ever regret it?" William asked Kate as they sat on their back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. It was a question they had asked each other several times over the past months, usually during quiet moments when they reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. Kate considered the question seriously, as she always did. "I regret that some people were hurt by our decision," she said finally. "I regret that we couldn't find a way to balance everything better while we were still working royals. But do I regret prioritizing our children's well-being and our family's happiness? Never." They had received hundreds of letters from families around the world, thanking them for normalizing the conversation about work-life balance and mental health. Parents wrote about feeling permission to make difficult choices for their own families after seeing William and Kate prioritize their children's needs over public expectations. The evening air was filled with the sound of their children's voices as they called out to their parents to come see a family of rabbits that had appeared at the edge of the garden. William and Kate stood up, brushing off their clothes and walking hand in hand toward their children. "Look," Louis whispered excitedly, pointing toward the rabbits. "They have babies." The family stood quietly together, watching the rabbit family graze peacefully in their garden. It was a perfect metaphor for what they had all found, a chance to exist naturally without constant observation, in a place where they could simply be themselves. Charlotte leaned against her mother's side, while George stood close to his father, and Louis crouched down to get a better view of the baby rabbits. In that moment, William and Kate realized that they had achieved something precious. Their children were experiencing the kind of childhood wonder that comes from having the freedom to notice small miracles. As darkness began to fall, they gathered their children and headed inside for dinner. The dining room table was set simply, with mismatched chairs that they had collected from various antique shops in the area. There were no formal place settings, no staff hovering nearby, just a family preparing to share a meal together. Over dinner, the children chattered about their plans for the weekend. George wanted to visit the local air museum, still nurturing his dream of becoming a pilot. Charlotte had heard about a horse rescue center nearby and was hoping to volunteer there. Louis announced that he had composed a new song on the piano and wanted to perform it for everyone after dinner. William and Kate exchanged a look of pure contentment. Their children weren't discussing upcoming royal engagements or worrying about their appearance in photographs. They were making plans based on their own interests and passions, exactly as children should. After dinner, Louis did indeed perform his composition, a simple but heartfelt melody that he had titled Family Song. As his small fingers moved across the keys, Kate felt tears in her eyes. This was a moment that would never have happened in their previous life, where every family activity had to be scheduled around official duties and security concerns. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, William and Kate received a phone call that brought their journey full circle. It was from a young couple, members of a European royal family who were struggling with the same pressures and decisions that William and Kate had faced. They had called seeking advice about how to balance royal responsibilities with family life. The most important thing to remember, Kate told them gently, is that there's no perfect solution. Every family has to find what works for them, but don't be afraid to make unconventional choices if they're the right choices for your children. William added, we learned that we could still serve our country and support our families without sacrificing our children's childhood. It just took courage to do things differently. After ending the call, they sat together in comfortable silence, reflecting on how their decision had rippled outward to influence other families facing similar challenges. They had become inadvertent advocates for a more balanced approach to public service, showing that it was possible to maintain dignity and respect, while also prioritizing personal well-being. The house was quiet now, filled with the peaceful sounds of a family at rest. Outside, the Norfolk countryside stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars, offering the kind of privacy and tranquility that their children had never experienced before. William and Kate had traded palaces for a normal home, royal duties for family time, and constant public attention for the freedom to live authentically. As they prepared for bed, Kate looked out the window at the garden where their children had played so freely that afternoon. Tomorrow, they would wake up as private citizens, make breakfast without staff assistance, and spend the day focused entirely on their family's needs and desires. It was an ordinary life that most people took for granted, but for them, it represented the greatest luxury imaginable. We did it, William said softly, wrapping his arms around his wife as they stood at the window. We actually did it. Yes, Kate replied, leaning into his embrace. We chose love over duty, family over tradition, and happiness over expectation. And look what we found. In the months that followed, their story would continue to inspire families around the world to examine their own priorities and make brave choices when necessary. But on this quiet evening in Norfolk, William and Kate were simply parents who had successfully protected their children's right to a normal childhood, while discovering that sometimes the most radical act is simply choosing to be happy. Their silent farewell to royal life had indeed left millions in tears, tears of understanding, admiration, and hope that love and family could triumph over even the most deeply rooted traditions. They had shown the world that true nobility comes not from titles or duties, but from the courage to follow one's heart in service of those we love most.